U.S. President Donald Trump has moved quickly in his first month and a half in office with a barrage of executive orders, a severe cutback of the federal workforce, and cuts to foreign aid. Much of what he's done was foreshadowed in a document written by conservatives titled Project 2025, which was a blueprint of sorts for how Trump should govern in his second term. So the question now is, what else can we expect?
During the campaign, Donald Trump claimed not to know what Project 2025 was. He posted on social media, "I have no idea who is behind it. I disagree with some of the things they're saying, and some of the things they're saying are absolutely ridiculous and abysmal." But his actions in office have a lot of overlap with the conservative plan. Time magazine found that 2/3 of Trump's executive orders mirror or have overlap with Project 2025. The project is a nearly 1,000-page wish list of proposals and recommendations reflecting conservative priorities and a desire to consolidate power to make sure the administration isn't foiled by government bureaucrats. Project 2025 is divided into 4 main pillars: giving the president more power and installing loyal backers, defending America's borders and sovereignty, declaring the family as the focal point of American life, and more firmly rooting Christian ideology in U.S. society. So far, Trump has acted aggressively to expand his power, firing people across the government to install proven loyalists. He's sent U.S. troops to the southern border with Mexico. He's also made moves that are in agreement with a conservative Christian ideology, ordering the government to recognize only 2 sexes, male and female, and restricting information on abortion. Internationally, Trump's shuttering of the U.S. Agency for International Development, as well as the U.S. withdrawal from the World Health Organization and the Paris Climate Accord, also overlap with Project 2025 recommendations. So what's next? Project 2025 recommends a broad attack on the national health system, including eligibility for social programs. It calls for a pivot in international affairs towards countering China, and leaving the question of Russia's war on Ukraine to presidential leadership. Going forward, Project 2025 gives the world a preview of an immense concentration of power in one person, allowing the president to rule more and more like a king, not the U.S. democracy we've known until now.
Catherine Kluver-Ashbrook of the Bertelsmann Foundation joins us now. Catherine, welcome to the show. Now that we're a month and a half into Trump 2.0, is there any reason to believe he's not heavily influenced by Project 2025 and its authors?
No, there's no reason to believe that, in particular because major authors of Project 2025 now hold key roles in the U.S. administration. We're speaking in a journalistic outlet. The head of the FCC, effectively the office that controls what gets sent over American airwaves, that chapter was authored by a man named Brendan Carr, who's now in charge of the FCC. Major transformations to how the United States does business in the world, including the idea of freezing money, freezing assets, for instance, for Ukraine, fall under the idea of impoundment, which, by the way, was the idea, brainchild, of a man named Russell Vought, who's now in charge of the Office of Management and Budget. So you see, personnel makes policy. Much of that personnel is direct from the authorship of Project 2025. He's very much on track to do and to exceed what is in the 924 pages of Project 2025.
Now, generally speaking, the U.S. presidency has become more powerful over history. But what stands out to you about how that has been accelerating in the second Trump administration?
Well, over the 4 years that Donald Trump was not in office, what his strategists and tacticians, some of whom are the same but not always, formed themselves around the unifying idea was that you should support unitary executive theory, which is a theory in U.S. constitutional law, but effectively makes the American president akin to king. And I would give to you that the constitutional forebearers and the anniversary of the founding of the U.S. as a democracy 250 years ago will be on the docket next year. fundamentally wanted to depart from that idea because they had witnessed that in Great Britain. That was what the fundamental war that began American democracy was all about. But there are theorists and then, of course, operators now in the Trump system that want exactly that. And we've seen Donald Trump use precisely that language. We just saw the cover of Time magazine. He said a number of times on Truth Social over the last couple of days, effectively something to say, look, the king decides, the king am I, some version of that. And that just underscores the fact that power, they feel, should be cemented in the Oval Office, and Congress should not have the control function it has by law and by the American Constitution.
Let's look at the cuts we've been seeing at federal agencies. Trump and his now sidekick, Elon Musk, says it's cost-cutting. Critics say it's aimed at politicizing the federal workforce. Some, and Applebaum, even go so far as to say it's an effort aimed at regime change. How do you see it?
Well, you absolutely see that at play, in particular, since there's a second part of this cuts to the federal workforce. The second part, and that's also part of the wider Project 2025, so not just the Manifest for Leadership, which is the book we've been talking about, but to bring in 54,000 loyal federal workers into the workforce. Now, I give to you that what we're seeing now, how much expertise, how much knowledge, how much science, how much capacity is being struck out of an American workforce. We've also seen over the last couple of hours that DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, which is not a department, I'll also give you, has had to correct on the numbers of dollars it is saving the American taxpayer. In fact, none of those numbers originally added up. But the basic idea is that this will go further and have a backstory by bringing in loyalists who will effectively write blank checks for the kind of policy that that Donald Trump and his strategists want stewarded out of the White House. So that will go further and be even more drastic in its consequences.
Yeah, Project 2025 is also calling to move the Justice Department and all its enforcement arms under the president's control. It's about lurching the U.S. to the right on cultural issues. How long-lasting could the measures that Trump is implementing right now as we speak be?
Well, since you mentioned Anne Applebaum, we've learned from the Polish example, from the Hungarian example, and we're seeing currently in the Slovak example right here in Europe how long and how hard it is to roll back changes, particularly to institutional structures. You cannot effectively do that in one sort of term of change of executive policy. So some of the things that are planned and some of the things that are frankly already have been put in motion, particularly through the cuts in DOGE, will have resonant long-term effects on the functionality, the control mechanisms in American democracy, the oversight mechanisms in American democracy, and also the pluralistic design of the American federal system. And those are dangers going forward. And particularly for the Europeans, by the way, there's much more in the offing in terms of America stepping back from its international responsibilities. All that is also in Project 2025.
Says Catherine Kluver Ashbrook. Many thanks.
My pleasure.